So it's about 6:30 in the morning. Last night I tried to get to Wombeyan Caves to the campground there in order to camp, but due to the bushfires, the roads were shut down, so I couldn't go through, and I thought it was pretty dangerous due to the amount of trees that were burnt. So instead, I ended up camping on basically somebody's driveway on the side of the road down a little side road, which is where I am now. I'm just gonna make some coffee and then try and get out of here really early, um, so that I'm not bothering anyone. It's shaping up to be pretty good. There's no wind, not a cloud in the sky. In late 2019 and early 2020, the Blue Mountains in eastern New South Wales were hit with the worst bushfires in living memory. The worst of these fires, the Gospers Mountain Fire, burned about 500,000 hectares. Following these fires, the businesses in the Blue Mountains took a massive hit to their income. Usually, during summer especially, tourists from Sydney pour into the Blue Mountains on holidays, but this hadn't happened due to the catastrophic conditions. Now the fires were over, I wanted to take a road trip into the Blue Mountains and take some time visiting the towns and sites that I had missed on my previous trips. Hopefully also bringing some much needed tourism back to the area. After camping the first night, I set off early in the morning. After about 5 minutes on the road, I had a kangaroo jump right out in front of me, which you can see here. I was going quite slow, so I wasn't in any danger of hitting it, but it did give me a shock. You can see on the video that the poor kangaroo jumped across the road and promptly slipped over on the gravel on the other side of the road. I wanted to make this trip several weeks earlier in late February, but due to 2 weeks of heavy rain, I was stuck at home. Luckily, when I finally did get the time to head up to the mountains, I was able to enjoy the results of that rain. Everywhere I went was bright emerald green with freshly grown grass. The first town I stopped at was Oberon, which is a small town. Out of curiosity, I rode down to Lake Oberon, which is a lake that borders the town. Here, there's large tors of rock surrounding the lake, which is apparently pretty good for trout fishing. There's also a free camping area that looks quite nice, and if I had planned better, I would have stayed here the first night rather than down a back road. Just before Oberon is a private garden called Mayfield, which is open to the public for a fee. I stopped at the cafe and coughed up $20 to enter the garden. It took me about an hour to walk around it, and the entire garden was virtually empty. I wondered how many people would normally be patronizing a place like this if there were the usual amount of travelers coming through the Blue Mountains. The most impressive thing in the garden was a long avenue of poplar trees, which led down over a lawn to a circular pool with an obelisk in the center that was all done in an ancient Greek style. After Oberon, I headed further into the mountains. I planned to make it to Katoomba that afternoon. Katoomba is one of the most popular towns in the Blue Mountains due to its close proximity to Sydney and the direct train route that goes there, making it easily accessible for a day trip. Because of this, Katoomba has a fairly built-up town centre of fancy hotels, rustic cafes, and more antique shops than you can poke a stick at. If you are visiting, of particular interest is the Carrington, a hotel which prides itself on being virtually unchanged from when it was built in 1883. You're able to walk around the bottom floor even if you aren't a guest of the hotel, and it's worth the time to do, especially if you're interested in what an 1880s manor house might have looked like, complete with paintings, antique furniture, and a billiard room. In addition to the Carrington is the Hydro Majestic, another hotel which lives up to and even exceeds the opulence of the Carrington. I didn't stop at the Hydro Majestic, but I will mention that it's there if you want to visit. The other main attraction of Katoomba is the Three Sisters, an impressive rock formation which you can see from the cliffs over the Jameson Valley. I remember as a child in primary school being told about the indigenous legend which gave the name to the Three Sisters. Three sisters, the legend goes, had fallen in love with three men from a rival tribe. Because the lovers could not be together, the men decided to run away with the women, but this was discovered before it could take place, and a battle between the tribes ensued. To protect the women, a sorcerer used a magic bone to turn the sisters to stone. But during the battle, the sorcerer was killed or lost the bone, and was therefore unable to turn the sisters back to their human form. And so the three sisters remain as a rock formation to this day. There's a lot of controversy as to whether this is actually an authentic indigenous story, but that's what I was taught in school. After spending a day in Katoomba, I headed back towards Canberra. More than I was interested in seeing the shops and sights of Katoomba, I was interested in riding the curving roads of the mountains, especially since the weather was so nice and the scenery was so green and full of life. I made it a personal goal to stop at as many cafes and bakeries as I could along the way. The final place that I'll talk about is Hartley. This is a town that exists between Oberon and Katoomba, just off the Great Western Highway. Hartley is a historical village. This cluster of houses and public buildings has been kept in a historically accurate condition for the most part. There's a church along with a monastery situated right next to it, an old courthouse, and what was once a pub. The village of Hartley was originally a major settlement along the Great Western Highway, but was later eclipsed by other towns along the road. It's worth visiting if you're interested in what these settlements might have looked like when the Great Western Highway was just a trail cutting through the mountain wilderness. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're interested, there's another video I made on the Blue Mountains. It was actually the first motorcycle road trip I ever took, so it's been a bit of a nostalgia trip to visit the same areas that I had on this very first trip, which was 2 years ago. Well, that's it from me. Ciao.